So the Middle East and North Africa, they have been hit hard over the near term by the fall in oil prices. Saudi Arabia had $750 billion in reserves. They've already burnt through $100 billion just to offset the fall in oil prices. So how long can Saudi Arabia deal with the pain of the low oil prices? A lot of the smaller oil producers in the region are already suffering tremendously. We're seeing huge public sector spending cuts across the region now. These economies aren't in a recession. They're still growing slightly. But the public sector the amount of public spending had been so high in these countries. People have been given, oil and gas are free and massive infrastructure investments. So that's being scaled back at a huge level right now in those countries. Outside of the oil-producing countries, it's also the political unrest has caused a lot of problems, as well as the fact that these rich oil-producing countries are the primary investors in a lot of the non-oil-producing countries in the region. So across the board, the near-term outlook in the Middle East and North Africa is pretty dire, at least for 2016. The political outlook, what's interesting, we just had the Arab Spring. We're pushing, democracy is going to spread across the Middle East and North Africa. Well, look how many elections are in the region next year. None. There's not a single election in the Middle East and North Africa this year. Not one. The Arab Spring has been an utter and total failure. Outside of Tunisia, which is the one country which has managed to transition to democracy and has a vibrant democracy where rival political parties have peacefully exchanged power, there is not in Israel, which is I don't include in this group at the moment, there is not a really good functioning democracy across the entire region. Not a single one. The Arab Spring failed miserably to bring democracy to the region, and it unleashed forces that were suppressed for a long time in many of these countries. The key issue going forward is this Sunni-Shiite divide. This is really what's driving the division between the Saudi Arabian-led side on Sunni side and the Iranian-led Shiite side. And we see this in Iraq, where the government is a Shiite-dominated government supported by Iran. Syria, an Alawite, Alawites are an offspring of Shiism, leading in Syria, so Iran backing them. Yemen, the civil war there is between a Iran-backed group of rebels called the Houthis and the Sunni government, which is being backed by Saudi Arabia, and at least, I think, 12 other countries now have troops in Yemen. So this sectarian divide, much like there was a division in Europe in the 15th, 16th, 17th century between Protestants and Catholics, here in the Middle East, we have the Sunni-Shiite divide, which is driving a lot of the conflicts in the region. And we have a relatively new monarchy in Saudi Arabia, which is taking a very hard line towards dealing with Shiite insurgencies. Africa had been a very successful economy in recent years. It had been growing at a very high clip, but they've been hit very hard as well by the fall in commodity prices. A lot of the growth was being generated by offshore oil and gas developments, for example, in countries like Ghana and Tanzania and Mozambique. That's obviously taken a big hit with the fall in the price of oil. It's expensive to produce offshore oil in deep water like they're doing there is tremendously expensive, and it was lucrative when the price of oil was $110 a barrel. It's not very lucrative when it's down as low as $27 a barrel. So the outlook for the economies in this region has deteriorated somewhat over the near term. South Africa has really deteriorated. The political situation there, Jacob Zuma, their president, has completely bungled the economy and the politics there. And a lot of people are losing faith in South Africa, including a lot of South Africans. We do business with quite a number of South Africans, and they are certainly among the most pessimistic people we deal with at the moment. And that's not typical of South Africans. Again, the political situation, there are a number of places and countries in the area, in this region, that are continuing to be beset by violence and warfare. And that is really holding back the growth of the economy of the region. It's holding back the integration of the region. It's holding back the development of the infrastructure of the region, which is absolutely necessary for its development. Now, China's invested pretty heavily in the region, the infrastructure of the region, but a lot more has to be done. And that chart's very interesting, because where's the population growing in the world? It's right there. I mean, look at that. There's going to be more than 1.5 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa by the middle of this century, more than 2 billion sub-Saharan Africans by the end of this century. This is where population growth is occurring. An ever-increasing number, an ever-increasing share of the global population is going to be found in sub-Saharan Africa. So will they develop economies and infrastructures and systems in time to deal with this huge amount of population increase? Or will we start to see people starting to leave the region in huge numbers, like we started to see from the Middle East and Central Asia this year, over the past year in the Mediterranean.